It's Sharon with Boat, and welcome back. It is the Country Viewpoint here on your Colour of Country Life, Flow FM, and it's time to take a look at rental pain across numerous Australian states. And joining me on the line now is Kent Lardner. He's the founder of Suburbtrends, and he's on the line to talk to me about why it is indeed a bad time to be in either of Queensland, South Australia, or indeed New South Wales hunting a property to rent. Kent, great to have you on the line with us. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. I'm better than a lot of renters across Australia.
Yes, indeed. Well, Kent, the information that's coming out and the data that you're bringing us in this latest media release is quite fascinating. So just paint the picture for our listeners as to why it is that for these three states in particular, it is a very tough time indeed to be trying to find a property to rent.
Yeah, so I've looked at a number of metrics. So one of the key metrics is how much rents have increased. Then I've also looked at how much of your weekly household income is being allocated to rent. And when that gets above 30%, it becomes a bit of a problem, and it's severely unaffordable by global standards. I've looked at a couple of other key metrics as well, vacancy rates and how they've increased or decreased. And when vacancy rates are low and decreasing, that's putting even further pressure on prices going up. So as a result, we have a lot of places across the country feeling the pinch, with a lot of their household income being allocated to the weekly rent.
So I feel as though, Kent, many everyday Australians just seem to want to assume that it depends on what the general cost of living is like in any particular state as to what determines, where the rent is highest and hardest to find. So obviously that's not true as per what this information tells us.
Look, typically we've got some pockets around the country where the percentages are above 50%. Now, the gotcha that I've with some of these metrics is that we're using the median household income, and typically the median in some areas is not normally distributed. That sounds a bit nerdy, but sometimes there are some occasions where the median might be a little bit odd. Having said that, on average, we're seeing a lot of states now showing above 30%. That's a crisis.
Now, the ACT, interestingly, is one part of the country where it's a little easier to find a rental. Do you attribute this to the fact that there's a lot of, people flying in and flying out of Canberra?
I think Canberra's had a reasonable supply. Typically, there's a correlation here with density. So if we've got a lot of apartments in a particular city or a particular state, typically that's going to have a correlation with affordability and supply. So it's a positive side effect of having quite a few units in Canberra. The other side of it as well is they're well paid. So a lot of your socioeconomic indicators are very, very strong for the ACT. But there's that commonality between the ACT and actually Melbourne. Melbourne City has a lot of units, and its percentage of money being spent on rents each week out of household income is down around that 25-26% mark. So it's quite good for that reason. So there is a bit of a theme here. Supply is pretty important.
Ken Lardner, founder of Suburbtrends, speaking to me there earlier on about renter pain, and there's more to discuss with him, including the regional scene. We'll bring you all that right after this short break. Stay tuned. Charlie Puth with the song That's Not How This Works. And welcome back. It is the Country Viewpoint here on your Colour of Country Life, Flow FM. Well, renters not being able to find properties to rent, that's not how it's meant to work. And joining me on the line is Kent Lardner, the founder of Suburbtrends. Now, just looking at some of our regions, Kent, we're hearing, particularly in South Australia, that there's a lot of money being allocated to various jurisdictions for new builds, which is obviously very welcoming news. So is there any relief potentially on the way for people living in country South Australia, for instance?
There's not a lot in the pipeline. Most of the pipeline supply, which is building approvals, they are very, very low. A typical developer will be telling you how hard it is to try and build cost effectively. So there's a lot of developers at the brink. A lot of builders are at the brink. So there's a problem. And we've got a pipeline supply building approvals relative to population growth is below where it needs to be. The other problem we do have is a lot of those approvals don't get completed. So then we have to apply the completion rate, which makes the problem even worse. So I'd love to be saying there were answers short term. There are not. It's a problem.
So you just referenced there the issues we've got with builders all around Australia. Many of them seem to be in crisis, and basically, they're sort of shutting up shop in subtle ways. In other instances, you've got people whose builds are, extremely delayed if they're lucky. What gives way here, Kent? How do we kickstart this? I mean, obviously there's supply chain issues, but they seem like they're going to go away at some point soon. A lot of builders go on about red tape as well. What sort of kickstarts the industry again?
It's interesting. I've spoken to a few builders and developers who are pointing to labour costs as their big driver. So obviously this becomes a bit of a two-edged sword. If we bring in a lot of labour, while people coming in from overseas to try and alleviate some of those labour cost issues, where do we house those people? So that becomes a bit of a problem. So there is no instant quick answer. However, there's a couple of things that just stand out for me. I do like the look of the lower cost type developments like medium density or higher density. The problem you then have is that some of these just don't fit in the region. So put that one to one side. There's a big opportunity in prefabrication and 3D printing. So I think there are some opportunities there. If you look at a lot of the granny flat manufacturers, at least half of them all claim that they do prefabrication. So there's some examples. So there are some supply options we have, but none of them are easy.
Ken, just looking at New South Wales, I saw a property get sold for $1.9 million. It was a very humble home indeed, and not in any particularly sort of highly sought after location. These prices are becoming astronomical for those wanting to buy. Does this have any correlation with the rental market?
It does. One of the things we found in a lot of parts of Sydney is the prices have detached themselves so far from typical first home buyers that they're no longer able to buy. So I think a lot of first home buyers either look at a unit. If they can afford a unit and can buy a unit in a good spot, that's fine, and they use that as a stepping stone. But if you're trying to buy a home as a first home buyer in Sydney, as an example, and you don't have rich parents, you're pushing it uphill. So you are going to be looking at the rental market. More and more people are saying, look, I'll just rent, I give up on buying, or they look to move to some commutable location like a Wollongong, etc., and that pushes up the prices of Wollongong. So the problem's kind of been shunted around a fair bit, but ultimately the only solution is supply.
Well, Ken Lardner, the founder of Suburbtrends, it's been great getting your insights on the show today. Really appreciate your time, and we'll have to check in with you again very soon indeed. Thank you very much, Ken.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
That's Ken Lardner. We'll have to speak to him again sometime soon because this topic sure is not going away. And nor are we, because it's an action-packed agenda today. I'll see you back here real soon. Don't go anywhere.